The ship was dying, and Mercer knew it. Red warning lights flashed across every screen in the engine room. The alarm screamed so loud that could barely hear his own thoughts. He grabbed the metal railing as the floor shook beneath his feet. Through the small window, he could see the planet below getting closer and closer. Too close. Way too close. Was 26 years old. He had brown hair, tired eyes, and oil stains on his hands from working on engines all day. He was nobody special, just a junior engineer on the exploration vessel Starbound Drift. The ship had been sent to survey planets in uncharted space. It was supposed to be a simple mission. Fly around, take some readings, go home. Nothing dangerous. But space had other plans. The engine had failed without warning. One moment everything was fine. The next moment the ship was falling toward a planet that no sane person would ever want to visit. 7. Had read the files on it during his training. Class X Death World. That meant it was one of the most dangerous places in the known galaxy. The air was filled with spores that made most species go crazy. The ground was covered with sharp crystal formations that could cut through metal. And the animals there were monsters. Real monsters, the kind that ate starships for breakfast. The ship hit the atmosphere and started to burn. Ran, he did not know where he was running to. There was nowhere safe on a falling ship, but his legs moved anyway. He stumbled through corridors filled with smoke and fire. He heard screaming somewhere behind him. He heard metal tearing apart like paper. He heard the sound of the universe telling him that his time was up. Then everything went black. When opened his eyes, he was lying on the ground, not the metal floor of the ship, real ground, dirt and rocks and something that looked like purple grass. He tried to move and pain shot through his entire body. Everything hurt. His head, his arms, his legs, his chest. But he was alive. Somehow, against all odds, he was alive. He sat up slowly and looked around. The Starbound Drift was gone. What was left of it was scattered across a valley in pieces. Twisted metal, burning wreckage, bodies, could see bodies in the debris. He recognized some of them. Captain Wells, doctor from the navigation team. They were all dead, every single one of them. Was alone. He stood up on shaking legs and checked himself for injuries. He had cuts all over his body. His uniform was torn. One of his boots was missing, but nothing was broken. He could walk. He could breathe. The air smelled strange, like flowers and rot mixed together, but it was not killing him, at least not yet. He searched through the wreckage for anything useful. Most of the supplies had been destroyed in the crash. The weapons locker was buried under a pile of burning metal that he could not move. The medical bay was completely gone. The emergency beacon, the one thing that could have called for help, was smashed into 100 pieces. After 2 hours of searching, had found 3 things. A small pack of emergency rations, enough food for maybe 3 days if he was careful. A torn piece of tarp that could work as a blanket, and a broken piece of metal that was sharp enough to cut things. That was it. That was everything he had to survive on a death world. Sat down on a rock and stared at the sky. It was orange and pink like a sunset that never ended. Beautiful in a way, beautiful and deadly. He thought about his life, his small apartment back on Earth, his mother who had cried when he left for space, his friends who had thrown him a party before he shipped out. Would they ever know what happened to him? Would anyone ever know? Something screamed in the distance. It was not a human scream. It was something else, something hungry. The sound echoed across the valley and made his blood go cold. He looked toward the horizon and saw shadows moving between the crystal formations. Big shadows, the kind of shadows that belonged to things with claws and teeth. Night was coming. On 7, night meant death. Grabbed his piece of metal and his small pack of supplies. He needed shelter. He needed to hide. He needed to survive until morning, and then he needed to figure out what to do next. One step at a time. That was the only way to stay alive. He found a small cave in the side of a hill. It was barely big enough for him to fit inside, but that was actually good. It meant that nothing big could follow him in. He crawled inside, covered the entrance with the tarp, and pressed his back against the cold stone wall. Outside, the screaming got louder. More voices joined in. It sounded like a chorus of nightmares, all singing together in the darkness. Could hear things moving past his hiding spot, heavy footsteps, sniffing sounds. Something scraped against the rocks just a few feet from where he was sitting. He held his breath and did not move. The night lasted 12 hours, did not sleep for a single second. He just sat there in the darkness, holding his piece of metal, waiting for something to find him and kill him. But nothing did. When the orange light of morning finally crept through the gaps in his tarp, he was still alive. Day 1 was over. Crawled out of the cave and looked at the world around him. In the daylight, he could see it more clearly. The crystal formations were everywhere, jutting out of the ground like giant knives. Some of them were as tall as buildings. They caught the light and sparkled with dangerous beauty. The plants were strange colors, blue and purple and black. Some of them moved on their own, reaching toward him with vine-like arms. He stepped back quickly. Even the plants here wanted to kill him. Far above, hidden in orbit, a research station floated silently. Inside, a group of aliens watched through their monitoring screens. They were called They had gray skin, 4 arms, and eyes that showed no emotion. They had been running experiments on this planet for centuries. They would drop different species here and watch them die. It was research, they told themselves. Science. A way to understand how different beings responded to impossible situations. They had seen hundreds of subjects come to 7. They had watched all of them die. Some lasted hours. A few lasted days. None had ever lasted more than a week. They looked at the human on their screens. Small, weak, no weapons, no tools, no hope. The lead researcher made a note in his file. Subject will expire within 24 to 48 hours. Standard mortality pattern expected. He was wrong. 3 weeks passed, and Mercer was still alive. The researchers did not understand it. They watched their screens with growing confusion as the human refused to die. Every day, they expected to see his body lying somewhere, torn apart by predators or poisoned by the plants. Every day, they were disappointed. Had learned fast, he had to. On 7, slow learners became food. In the first week, he had nearly died 6 times. He ate a berry that made him vomit for an entire day. He stepped on a plant that shot needles into his leg. He was chased by a creature with too many legs and too many teeth. He fell into a pit filled with something that smelled like acid. Each time, he survived by luck, by stubbornness, or by both. But luck runs out, stubbornness does not. By the second week, had stopped making mistakes. He learned which plants were safe to eat by watching what the small animals ate. If a creature ate something and did not die, then maybe it was safe for him too. He learned to test everything in tiny amounts first. A small bite. Wait an hour. If nothing bad happened, try a little more. He learned to find water by following the insects. The small flying bugs always knew where the clean streams were. He learned to build better shelters using the bones of dead creatures. Some of the bones were hollow and light but very strong. They made good frames for walls and roofs. He learned to make fire. This was the hardest thing. There was no wood on 7, only crystal and stone and strange plants. But some of the dried plants burned hot and fast. He used his piece of metal to strike sparks against the crystal rocks. It took him 3 days to get it right. When the first flame finally caught, almost cried. Fire meant warmth. Fire meant cooked food. Fire meant light in the darkness. Fire meant survival. By the 3rd week had become something new. He was not the same scared engineer who had crawled out of a crashed ship. He was harder now, leaner. His eyes had changed. They were always watching, always looking for danger, always planning 3 steps ahead. He had also started to hunt. The small creatures were easy. They were not used to being prey. They had no natural fear of something like. He built traps using vines and bones. He made snares that caught them by the legs. He made pits covered with leaves that they fell into. Every trap he built was a little better than the last one. but was getting bored with small prey. He wanted something bigger. He called them razorbacks. They were the size of horses, with 6 powerful legs and spines made of crystal growing from their backs. Their jaws were massive, built for crushing bone and metal alike. They hunted in packs of 5 or 6, and they were the most dangerous predators had seen so far. They were also the reason he could not explore certain parts of the valley. Their territory was too dangerous to enter. If he wanted to find better resources, better shelter, better chances of survival, he needed to deal with the razorbacks. So he watched them. For 5 days did nothing but observe. He followed the pack from a safe distance. He learned their patterns. They slept during the hottest part of the day. They hunted at dawn and dusk. They had a strict order within the pack. The biggest male was the leader. The others followed him without question. He also learned their weakness. The razorbacks were strong and fast, but they were not smart. They followed the same paths every day. They reacted to sounds without thinking, and most importantly, they could not climb. Found a canyon with steep walls and a narrow entrance. It was perfect. He spent 2 days preparing, gathering rocks and pushing them to the edge of the cliff above the canyon. He collected the smelliest thing he could find, the rotting body of a dead creature, and dragged it into the canyon. Then he waited. The pack came at dusk just like he knew they would. They smelled the dead thing and rushed into the canyon, all 6 of them, pushing and shoving to get to the food first. Watch from above. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking, but he did not hesitate. He pushed the first rock. It fell and hit the ground right at the canyon entrance. Then he pushed another, and another. The rocks crashed down in a thundering wave, blocking the exit, trapping the razorbacks inside. Some of the rocks hit the creatures directly. He heard bones breaking. He heard screaming. When the dust cleared, 5 razorbacks were dead. But one was still alive. Climbed down carefully and approached the survivor. It was a young female, smaller than the others. Her back leg was trapped under a heavy boulder. She could not move. When she saw coming, she snarled and snapped her massive jaws. Her crystal spine stood up like knives, ready to cut anything that got too close. Stopped about 3 feet away from her. He was holding a sharpened bone in his hand, ready to finish the job. One quick strike to the neck and it would be over. That was the smart thing to do. That was the safe thing to do. But did not move. He looked at the creature. She was injured and scared, trapped and alone, just like him. She had been following her pack, doing what she was supposed to do, and now she was here, waiting to die in a canyon on a planet that killed everything. Sat down on the ground. The razorback kept snarling, but there was confusion in her eyes now. Why was the prey just sitting there? Why was it not attacking or running away? Did not move for hours. He did not sleep. He just sat there watching her, letting her watch him. When night came, he built a small fire to keep the other creatures away. The razorback flinched at the flames but did not look away from him. On the second day, ate some of his food in front of her. He drank water from his container. He talked to her even though she could not understand. He told her about Earth, about his mother, about the ship, about how scared he had been when he first arrived. On the 3rd day, her snarling stopped. Stood up slowly. The razorback watched him with all 6 of her eyes. He walked toward the boulder that trapped her leg. He put his hands on it and pushed. It was heavy, so heavy, but he pushed with everything he had. The rock shifted. Then it moved. Then it rolled away. The razorback was free. She stood up on shaking legs and looked at. Her jaws could crush his skull in one bite. Her claws could tear him apart in seconds, but she did not attack. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and limped away into the darkness. Watched her go. He did not know if he would ever see her again. He did not know if he had done the right thing or the stupid thing. But it felt right. Up in orbit, the researchers were arguing. What they had just witnessed made no sense. No subject had ever shown this kind of behavior before. No subject had ever spared a predator. No subject had ever sat with death for 3 days and walked away unharmed. One of the researchers made a new note in the file. Subject displays unprecedented behavioral patterns. Recommend continued observation. For the first time in centuries, they were actually curious about what would happen next. Named her Vex. He did not know why that name came to him. It just felt right. Vex, short and sharp like the crystal spines on her back. She was 7 feet tall at the shoulder, covered in scales that changed color between black and deep purple. Her 6 eyes could see in every direction at once. Her claws were as long as forearm. She was built for killing, and she was beautiful. For the first month after he freed her, Vex followed at a distance. He would see her sometimes, watching from a ridge or hiding behind a crystal formation. At first, it made him nervous. Was she hunting him? Was she waiting for the right moment to attack? But days passed and she never came closer. She just watched. Decided to treat her like a neighbor. Every morning when he left his shelter, he would look toward wherever she was hiding and give her a small nod. Just a simple greeting. Then he would go about his day, hunting and gathering and building. Acting like a giant predator following him around was perfectly normal. The researchers watched this with great interest. They had expected the creature to kill the human. That was what predators did. That was how the natural order worked. But instead, both beings were acting in ways that made no scientific sense. Weeks passed. Improved his shelter, turning a small cave into something almost like a home. He dried meat over fires. He stored water in containers made from hollowed bones. He even made something like a bed, using soft plants piled on top of each other. It was not comfortable by Earth standards, but it was better than sleeping on cold stone. He noticed that Vex was getting closer each day. At first, she stayed hundreds of feet away, then 50 feet, then 20. She was testing the boundaries, seeing how he would react. Never reacted. He never showed fear or aggression. He just kept nodding to her each morning and going about his life. One evening was sitting by his fire, cooking a small animal he had caught. Vex was nearby, closer than she had ever been before, maybe 10 feet away, could see the firelight reflecting in her 6 eyes. Without thinking about it too much, tore off a piece of meat and tossed it toward her. Vex flinched. She looked at the meat. She looked at the meat again. Then very slowly she stretched her long neck forward and ate it. Smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in months. After that night, things changed between them. Vex started sleeping near his shelter, not inside it but close enough that he could hear her breathing. When went hunting, she would follow at a closer distance. Sometimes she would chase prey toward his traps, almost like she understood what he was doing. Started talking to her more. He knew she could not understand his words, but it helped him to speak out loud. He told her about his life before the crash. He told her about movies and music and food that did not try to kill you. He told her about his mother, who used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. He told her about his dream of seeing the stars up close. Vex would tilt her head sometimes like she was really listening. Maybe she was, did not know, but it made him feel less alone. 2 months after the canyon, everything changed again. Was gathering water from a stream when he heard them coming. Scavengers. They were smaller than Vex, about the size of large dogs, but they hunted in groups of 20 or more. They had long snouts full of sharp teeth and skin that blended with the rocks. By the time you saw them, it was usually too late. Saw them too late. They surrounded him in seconds, cutting off every escape route. He had his bone knife, but that would not be enough. Not against this many. He backed up until his shoulders hit a rock wall. There was nowhere to run. The lead scavenger made a clicking sound and the pack started moving forward. They were not in a hurry. They knew their prey was trapped. They would take their time. Gripped his knife. If he was going to die, he would take some of them with him. He raised his weapon and prepared to fight. Then Vex came. She dropped from the ridge above like a falling star, her crystal spines fully extended, her roar shaking the air itself. She hit the pack like a storm. Her claws tore through bodies. Her jaws crushed bones. Her spine slashed anything that got too close. The scavengers screamed and tried to run, but Vex was faster. She was everywhere at once, a whirlwind of death and fury. In less than a minute, it was over. The surviving scavengers fled into the distance. The rest lay scattered on the ground, broken and still. Vex turned to face. Blood dripped from her jaws. Her eyes were wild from the fight. She was breathing hard, her massive chest rising and falling. Should have been afraid. Any sane person would have been afraid, but he was not. He stepped forward and placed his hand on her snout, right between her two front eyes. Her scales were warm and smooth under his fingers. She made a sound he had never heard before. It was deep and rumbling, almost like a purr. "Thank you," said quietly. From that day forward, they were partners. They hunted together, combining intelligence with Vex's strength and speed, would find the prey and make the plan. Vex would execute it with deadly precision. They developed their own language, a mix of gestures and sounds that let them communicate during hunts. A raised hand meant stop. A whistle meant go. A tap on her side meant turn left or right. They trusted each other completely. At night, Vex would curl around shelter, her body blocking the wind and keeping the other predators away. Nothing dared to attack them now. The word had spread through the ecosystem of 7. The human and the razorback were not prey. They were something else entirely. His 4th month on the planet passed, then his 5th, then his 6th. He stopped counting the days. He stopped thinking about rescue. This was his life now, and somehow, against all odds, it was not a bad life. Up in orbit, the researchers had stopped treating this as a normal experiment. What they were witnessing had never happened before, not in centuries of studies. A prey species and an apex predator, living together, hunting together, protecting each other. It broke every rule of biology they knew. The lead researcher sent a message to his superiors. This subject requires extended observation. Recommend indefinite continuation of study. He did not say what he was really thinking. He did not say that the humans scared him. He did not say that he was starting to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake by bringing Mercer to this planet. Some experiments, he was beginning to realize, did not go the way you planned. Some experiments created something new. And some experiments woke up things that should have stayed asleep. 8 months after the crash, Mercer found the bones. He was exploring a new area of the valley, a place he and Vex had never been before. The crystal formations here were older and larger, some of them rising hundreds of feet into the orange sky. Vex walked beside him, her 6 eyes scanning for danger, her spines half raised in caution. They found the bones in a shallow cave at the base of a cliff. At first, thought they were animal bones, but then he looked closer and felt his stomach drop. These bones were not from animals. They were from people. Dozens of different species, all piled together in the darkness. He saw skulls with horns and skulls with multiple eye sockets and skulls that looked almost human but not quite. He saw rib cages and leg bones and spines twisted in positions that spoke of violent death. These were the remains of other subjects, other experiments, other beings that had been dropped on 7 to die. Felt something cold settle in his chest, rage, pure and absolute. He had suspected for a while that his crash was not an accident. The engine failure had been too sudden, too clean. No warnings, no build-up, just instant death for the ship. Someone had made that happen. Someone had wanted him on this planet. Now he knew why. He searched the cave for hours, looking for any clue about who had done this. Near the back, hidden behind a pile of rubble, he found a door. A metal door with symbols he did not recognize. It took him 3 days to figure out how to open it. Behind the door was a research station. It had been abandoned for a long time, maybe decades, but it was still intact. The lights flickered on when entered, powered by some energy source he did not understand. The air was stale but breathable, and everywhere he looked there were screens and consoles and data storage units. Could not read the language, but some of the information was visual. He found videos, recordings of subjects being dropped onto the planet, recordings of them struggling to survive, recordings of them dying, one after another, while gray-skinned creatures with 4 arms watched and took notes. He found his own file, his own recording. He watched himself crawl out of the crashed ship, confused and bleeding, while numbers and graphs appeared on the screen. They were measuring him, timing him, waiting for him to die like all the others. Sat in the darkness of the station for a long time. Vex waited outside, sensing that her partner needed to be alone. When finally stood up, his eyes had changed again. The softness was gone. The fear was gone. All that remained was purpose. He would not just survive anymore. He would fight back. The station had tools. Real tools, not sharpened bones and rocks. It had a forge, a machine that could heat metal to incredible temperatures. It had materials, strange alloys and compounds that they had left behind. And it had information about the planet, detailed scans of every crystal formation and mineral deposit within 100 miles. Started building. The sword took him 6 weeks to make. He began with a core of the strongest metal he could find in the station's storage. Then he went out into the world with Vex and collected crystal from the formations that dotted the landscape. Not just any crystal. He chose pieces that rang with a specific tone when struck, pieces that seemed to vibrate with an inner energy. He melted the metal and the crystal together in the forge, watching as they fused into something new. The blade came out of the flames glowing with inner light, its edge sharper than anything he had ever seen. When he swung it through the air, it hummed with a sound that made his teeth ache. But he was not finished. Over the months, Vex had shed scales from her body, leaving them scattered around their camp like fallen leaves, had collected them without really knowing why. Now he understood. He melted the scales down and used the liquid to coat the sword's handle and guard. The purple-black substance hardened into a material that fit perfectly in his hand. The sword was part metal, part crystal, part Vex. It was a piece of 7 itself, forged by human determination and shaped by a bond that had never existed before. Held it up to the light and smiled. It was beautiful. It was terrible. It was exactly what he needed. Now came the second part of his plan. The station's communication equipment was old but powerful. They had used it to send reports back to their superiors. Spent 2 weeks studying it, learning how it worked, figuring out how to boost its signal. When he was finally ready, he connected it to every frequency he could find. He did not call Earth. Earth was too far away, and honestly, he did not care about being rescued anymore. He had found a home here, strange as that sounded. No, he wanted something else. He wanted the galaxy to know what they had done. He wanted them to face consequences. He wanted justice. He recorded his message and sent it out into the void. My name is Mercer. I am human. I have survived on the planet 7 for 243 days. To the Dominion, I know what you have done. I have found your research station. I have seen your records. I know about every being you dropped on this planet to watch them die. And I know you are watching me right now. He paused and looked at Vex, who was sitting beside him. I am coming for you, and I will not be alone. The message spread faster than had expected. Within hours, it had reached the Galactic Concord, the governing body that oversaw relations between the different species of the galaxy. Within days, it was the only thing anyone was talking about. They tried to deny everything. They claimed the station was unauthorized. They claimed the experiments were the work of rogue scientists. They claimed the human was lying, that he was insane, that his mind had been damaged by the planet's spores. But had sent the files along with his message. The videos, the records, the death counts, everything. The galaxy was watching now. The galaxy was listening, and the galaxy was very, very angry. Up in orbit, the research team was in panic. They had received orders to deal with the situation, but they did not know how. Kill the human. That would only prove his accusations. Capture him. He had an apex predator at his side that could tear through their entire team. The lead researcher stared at his screens, watching walk out of the station with his sword gleaming in the orange light. Vex walked beside him, her spines fully raised, her eyes fixed on the sky. The researcher had studied survival for his entire career. He had watched thousands of subjects die on death worlds across the galaxy. He thought he understood what it meant to survive. Now he realized he had never understood anything. Survival was not just about staying alive. Survival was about becoming something more than you were before. Survival was about refusing to break, no matter what the universe threw at you. Mercer had not just survived 7, he had conquered it. And now he was ready to conquer everything else. The ship came 3 weeks after sent his message. He saw it enter the atmosphere, a silver dot against the orange sky, growing larger as it descended. Vex saw it too. She raised her spines and growled, ready to attack this strange metal bird that was invading their territory. Put a hand on her side. Easy, he said softly. Let us see who they are first. The ship landed in the clearing near the old station. It was not a ship. The design was different, smoother, with symbols on the side that did not recognize. As he watched, a ramp lowered and a figure emerged. She was not human. Her body was long and serpentine, covered in shimmering blue scales. She had no legs, instead gliding on a powerful tail. Her arms were thin but elegant, and her face was almost beautiful in a strange, alien way. She wore a silver robe with golden symbols that marked her as someone important. Mercer, she said, her voice carrying across the distance between them. My name is Ambassador. I represent the Confederation and, by extension, the Galactic Concord. We have come to investigate your claims. Walked toward her, Vex at his side. He saw the ambassador's eyes widen as she took in the full sight of them. He knew what they must look like. A lean human with wild eyes and a glowing sword in his hand. A massive predator with crystal spines and 6 watchful eyes. They were not what she had expected. Ambassador said, his voice was rough. He had not spoken to another person in almost a year. I appreciate you coming all this way. His gaze moved from to Vex and back again. The creature, she said carefully, is it safe? Her name is Vex, and she is safer than most people I have met. Vex made a low rumbling sound, almost like she understood and agreed. The next few days were a blur of questions and examinations. Had brought a team of scientists and investigators. They documented everything. The crashed ship, the cave of bones, the abandoned station, the recordings. They tested for the spores that were supposed to cause madness but found nothing. Somehow, his human biology had adapted to them. They tried to test Vex too, but she would not let anyone except touch her. When one scientist got too close with a scanning device, she snapped her jaws and nearly took his arm off. After that, they kept their distance. The Dominion sent their own representatives. They arrived on a gray ship filled with gray aliens who spoke in gray voices and said nothing of substance. They continued to deny everything. The station was unauthorized. The experiments were the work of a few bad individuals. The Dominion had no official knowledge of any Death World studies. But the evidence was too strong. The records were too detailed. The galaxy had seen the truth, and no amount of denial could hide it. The Galactic Concord issued a formal summons. Mercer was invited to address the full assembly on the capital world of Nexus Prime. He would have a chance to tell his story directly to the leaders of every major species in known space. Agreed, but he had one condition. Vex comes with me, he said. Hesitated. That is highly unusual. The assembly hall has never allowed a Class X predator inside. Then they will have to make an exception. She saved my life. She is my partner. Where I go, she goes. In the end, they agreed. They did not really have a choice. The journey to Nexus Prime took 2 weeks. Spent most of it in a private cabin with Vex, preparing for what was to come. He practiced his speech over and over, making sure every word was right. He cleaned his sword until it gleamed like a star. He brushed Vex's scales until they shone with purple light. When they finally arrived, stood at the window and looked out at Nexus Prime. It was a world of cities, endless towers of glass and metal stretching toward the clouds. Ships flew everywhere, thousands of them, carrying beings from every corner of the galaxy. Had grown up in a small town on Earth. He had never seen anything like this. "Are you ready?" asked from behind him. Looked at Vex. She looked back at him with all 6 of her eyes. "Yes," he said, "we are ready." The assembly hall was the largest room had ever been in. It could hold millions of beings, and today it was packed. Representatives from every species in the Conquered had come to hear the humans speak. They filled the seats in a rainbow of colors and shapes. Some had wings. Some had tentacles. Some had forms that could not even describe. He walked down the central aisle with Vex at his side. His sword hung at his hip. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Everyone was staring. Everyone was afraid. Good thought, let them be afraid. He reached the speaking platform and turned to face the crowd. For a moment, he said nothing. He just stood there, letting them see him, letting them see Vex, letting them understand that they were looking at something they had never seen before. Then he began to speak. "You called 7 a death world," he said, his voice carrying through the hall. "You said it was uninhabitable, impossible to survive, a place where nothing could live for more than a few days." He paused and looked at the delegation. They would not meet his eyes. The Dominion used that world as a laboratory. They dropped sentient beings there to watch them die. They recorded their fear, their pain, their desperate attempts to survive. They did this for centuries. They did this for science. They did this because they thought no one would ever find out. He lifted his sword. The blade caught the light and sent fractured rainbows dancing across the walls. "I was supposed to be one of their subjects. I was supposed to die like all the others, but I did not die. I survived. I adapted. I found a partner in a creature they would have called a monster." He gestured to Vex, and she raised her head proudly, her spines extending to their full height. "I forged this sword from the crystals of a world that was supposed to kill me. I coated it with the scales of a predator who became my friend. I did not just survive 7. I made it my home." He looked out at the assembled beings, at all the different faces and forms, at all the fear and wonder in their eyes. That is what humans do. We do not break. We do not give up. We do not accept that something is impossible. We adapt. We endure. We overcome. And we remember those who wronged us. He turned to face them directly. "You will answer for what you have done. Not to me, to the galaxy, to all the species whose members died on that world for your entertainment, to the families who never knew what happened to their loved ones." The leader started to speak, but raised his hand. "I am not finished." The hall went silent again. "I am not asking for revenge. I am asking for change. I am asking that 7 be protected, not as a death world, but as a sanctuary. A place where beings can choose to test themselves against the impossible if they wish. A place where the strong can prove their strength on their own terms." He lowered his sword and smiled. "And I will stay there. I will watch over it. I will make sure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else without their consent." The vote was not even close. The experiments were condemned. Their leaders were removed from power. 7 was declared a protected sanctuary under supervision. In the years that followed, Mercer became a legend. Beings from across the galaxy came to 7 to test themselves, to prove their worth, to find out what they were truly made of. Some survived. Some did not. but all of them made the choice themselves. Vex stayed at side until the end of her natural life. Their bond never weakened. When she finally passed, peacefully in her sleep, buried her on a hill overlooking the valley where they had first met. He planted a crystal from her favorite resting spot at her grave. It grew into a formation that sparkled in the orange light. And in the halls of power across 1,000 worlds, beings spoke in hushed tones of the human who had been left bare-handed on a death world, and returned carrying a sword bestowed by his predator companion. They spoke his name with respect. They spoke his name with fear. They spoke his name with wonder. Mercer the survivor, the unbreakable, the human.